Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to episode 199 of the Extra Mile podcast. This is your host, Jackson Mummy. I'm glad to have you with us. We're talking about all things bar exam related today, as we do every week. If this is your first time on the podcast, welcome. We're glad to have you with us. You can read or reach these podcasts in one of several different ways. We do them as videos by going to celebrationbarreview.com and then enter the episode number. So today it's celebrationbarreview.com/199. Or if you prefer to listen to the podcast, you can do that on Apple iTunes or on iHeartRadio or Spotify or pretty much any place you get your podcasts. Or you can go to our website for an archive of all of our episodes, 0 through 199, by going to celebrationbarreview.com. You'll see a link at the top of the page for podcasts. Just go ahead and click there. And you'll find the show notes going all the way back and all of the episodes that we've got. Well, we have a lot to talk about today. In the last few days, results came out in the last two big jurisdictions in the country, Georgia and California. And to put it mildly, they were disastrous. So I want to talk a little bit about those first. And then I've got a special message today that I'm titling What People Are Getting Wrong About Bar Exam Results. So stick around for that. This will be Jackson going on a rant, and hopefully there'll be some value there for you. Regardless of whether you took the exam in February 2018 or you're taking it in July or next year, I think you're going to find some information of value there. Now, I want to talk about the actual results in Georgia and California. I'm going to do that in just a moment as well. But I do want to let you know that if you are in need of taking the bar exam in July 2018 or February 2019 or later, we have a special free live seminar for you. It's called How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. It's a look at the powerful, proven way to pass, filled with information about the 4 steps that successful bar takers follow to pass their exams. We've got lots of case studies, lots of information, a lot of good information that you can use to take with you. Now, this webinar is completely free, but you do need to sign up in advance. And the webinar is given live on Monday and Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. So Monday and Thursday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern. That's 4 p.m. for those of you on the West Coast. In addition to that, we offer the same webinar as an on-demand presentation. So when you go to register, you can choose from Monday, Thursday, or on-demand to get the same information. Of course, on Monday and Thursday nights, I'm there live to do questions and answers, so I encourage you to join us for that. And to sign up, you can do it in one of several ways. You can go to our website at celebrationbarreview.com/webinar and sign up there. Or you can sign up here on the video page by just scrolling down to the bottom of the page, or just by going to our website. You'll see the link at the top of the home page. So no matter how you do it, make sure that you sign up and join us for this webinar. It's literally life-changing. We've had thousands of people go through it with great success, and so I hope you'll join us regardless of your circumstances, whether you're a first-time taker or a repeat bar taker. Love to have you with us on Monday or Thursday night. Now, I also want to let you know that these podcasts that we do, we also release a few days early in a couple of locations as videos, and you can take advantage of that very easily. If you simply go to our Facebook page, which is Celebration Bar Review, and you click to like our page, become a fan of the page, you'll receive notification when we do these presentations, usually a couple days before they are released to the public on Wednesday mornings. So if you want to check that out, feel free to do that. Also, we would love to get your honest rating and review, particularly on Apple iTunes. It helps expand the reach of the podcast so that more people will know about us. I am very grateful, as we're coming up on episode 200, of how many listeners we have and the impact it's made for people. So I appreciate that. I appreciate all of you sharing this information with your friends and colleagues, and hope that you'll continue to do that. Well, let's turn our attention now for a moment to the results specifically in California and Georgia. And then, as I say, I've got some generalized comments about what I think people are getting wrong about bar exam results. Now, to start with, in Georgia, the results came out on Friday, and they were, as anticipated, really, really bad results. The overall pass rate for all applicants in Georgia was only 47%. So whenever your overall pass rate is under 50%, clearly there are big problems. There were 600 people that took the exam, 286 passed. That's where the pass rate is derived. More significantly, there were more repeat bar takers than first-time takers. That's not unusual in February. And the pass rate for repeat bar takers was only 30%. So that is a staggeringly low number. Of note, a couple of sub-numbers here. The people that attended a bar examiner approved schools, that would be Atlanta Law School and John Marshall, no one passed from those schools at all. And foreign applicants, which is a still relatively small segment of the bar population in Georgia, the pass rate there was only 22%. So foreign graduates and those that did LLMs in Georgia only passed with a 22% rate. For repeaters in that group, the pass rate was 16.7%. For attorney applicants in Georgia, which is a sort of a specialized group because you only get one shot at the attorney exam, APPLE, the pass rate was 90%, which is what you would expect. That's a good solid number, and it stayed pretty much the same all along. But again, what we know about the Georgia exam is it's a very difficult exam. They give very little in the way of feedback or information after their results, so it's hard to know what in the exam was particularly difficult. I'm going to talk a little bit about their pass rate and scoring later, but I think it's significant to note that the exam continues to be among the most difficult in the country. The pass rate of 47% is one of the lowest ever, and it is certainly a cause for concern. I will also say that we feel very fortunate that we had students that passed that exam and had students whose scores went up dramatically. So it is possible to take the test and pass, even if you're a repeat bar taker. But I would definitely be aware of this test. It's a tough one. But as usual, the Georgia results really got wiped out by the tsunami of the California results. Because the California results, I'm afraid and sorry to say, hit an all-time low in terms of pass rates in February of 2018. If you haven't heard these numbers yet, brace yourself. They're pretty stunning. Only 27% of all the applicants in the California bar in February passed. That's right. You heard me right. 27% overall pass rate. That is a staggeringly low number, the worst that it has ever been in California. And no real explanation for it that the examiners provided, just simply to say, oh, too bad, sorry. When we look at the results themselves, first-time applicant pass rate was only 39%. So only 39% of the first-time bar takers, which is the elite bar takers, really these are the ABA accredited first-time takers, only 39%. For repeat bar takers, which made up again the majority of the bar population, the pass rate was 23%. For attorney applicants in California, there were 600 of them approximately, 43% passed. So if you're comparing California to Georgia for the attorney applicants, 43% passed in California, 90% passed in Georgia. Go figure. I mean, there's no rationality to this whatsoever. I think even more disturbing is that those who went to California accredited law schools, but not ABA, had a 9% pass rate. The fixed facility, 5% pass rate. The unaccredited correspondence schools, like Concord, had a 13%. The unaccredited distance learning, that might also include Concord, I'm not picking on them, but that pass rate was 5% for repeaters. And their first-time pass rate was under 25% in all of those. So when you look at those numbers across the board, they are really horrific. There were, there were about 3,400 repeat bar takers, and there were 1,200 first-time takers. So 4,700 applicants, so one of the largest, I think probably the largest bar exam in the country, bigger than New York, bigger than Florida. So those are the numbers that we're looking at, and it was stunning. Virtually impossible to pass that. And we saw an awful lot of people just crash and burn across the country. So if you were one of the people that took the Cal Bar and you did not pass in February, you're in good company. You're in a large group. Does that mean you should give up? No. but California is clearly the monster here. And if you have any choice about where to take a bar exam, I would tell you right now, do not take the Cal Bar. It is just simply a brutal test. We had students pass, that's great, but I will tell you that it's just such a difficult test, and the odds are really stacked against you. So those are the numbers that we've got. You remember, if you've been a long-time watcher or listener of this podcast, I have been predicting this outcome for several weeks now, ever since we started getting Florida and New York results. I thought that the trend was pretty clear. It's as bad as we thought, maybe even a little bit worse. I think my Karnak impression, I thought the pass rate would be 25%, so it was 27% in California, so I missed it by 2%. So there is a lot there, a lot to unpack. Well, I want to talk about the February 2018 results from a little broader perspective now. And I put together a couple of items that I'm calling what people got wrong about bar exam results. As I've been reading what's been published in the mainstream media and in the online blogs and in the law school world and on posts and forums around the internet, there is, as always, a lot of misinformation and bad information. There's a lot of content that I think really harms people. I think there's a lot of content that really sends folks down the wrong direction. And after having done this for so many years and been involved with so many thousands of students, I think it's important to speak truth about some of these things and to call them out. Now, you may not agree with everything I'm going to say today, and that's fine, but I think it's important that there be some additional voices added to this conversation that are not simply parroting the same lines and saying the same things. Saying the same thing over and over again doesn't make it true. It just means there's more voices saying it. And I quite frankly think, not that I want to be a contrarian, but frankly, when the truth is different than the statements that are being made, it's important to speak the truth. So I've got 5 truths for you. We'll see what you think, but I encourage you to check this out. Whether you took the exam in February 2018 or you're taking the exam, I think all of these things are important. So 5 things that I have seen that people are getting wrong about bar exam results. Number 1 is the statement that students are less qualified. The subtext of this is they're dumber. Now, this statement comes up over and over and over again. It is parroted by bar examiners. It is parroted by academics. It is parroted by the media, by the legal press, by the bar associations themselves. And yet there's very little empirical evidence for that statement at all. The reality is something subtly different, and I think it's important to point this out. What has changed over the last 10 years or so is that the pool of applicants for the bar exam and in law school and in the law generally has become much more diverse. Now, when I went to law school, my class was still mostly male. It was mostly under the age of 25. I was an outlier. I was a bit older. And it was almost all middle and upper class folks. And I went to an elite big box law school, and that's the way it was structured. And the higher you went up on the rankings, the whiter and the younger and the more wealthy it got. That was the reality. And as time went on, we saw some changes in that. The first big change was in gender. Obviously, we started to see more women in the law school classes. Today, we even see a majority of women in many law schools. We started to see a greater diversity of race and ethnicity. No longer was it purely white, although quite frankly, the number of Hispanics and the number of African Americans and the number of other folks who are not like me has grown, but is still relatively small. It is still minorities in most law schools. And as race started to become more of a factor in admissions, we saw a switch over time. We also saw a switch in age. There were more law school applicants who were coming in as second career applicants. We saw this particularly with women who were coming into a second career, perhaps because of a divorce or a change in life circumstance, or maybe their children had just grown and left the home and they were ready to come back. But we started to see an aging of the law school population. We've seen that continue to inch up year after year after year. We have essentially an older law school population nationally than we did 25 years ago, and it continues to grow older. What about socioeconomics? Well, law school is brutally expensive. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And frankly, in order to afford law school, you either had to take out massive loans or you had to be wealthy and be able to take out loans against your home or your 401k or whatever it might have been. We continue to see that law schools continue to reward high socioeconomics. They don't reward and they don't particularly go after folks who are have less income and less resources. However, some law schools began to adopt admission policies that were need blind. The very best law schools had done that for years, but then we started to see newer, younger law schools trying to reach out with a more affordable pricing structure. And so the overall net worth of law students actually has decreased over the years. And so now we have a less wealthy cohort coming through law school and a less wealthy cohort taking the bar exam. How much are they in debt? Well, according to the ABA, the number is somewhere around $160,000 when you include lost wages if you fail the bar exam once. So it's a lot of debt, and I know lots of students with $200,000 plus debt. Now, what's the point of giving you those overall trends? Well, you see, when the pundits tell you that students are getting dumber, and sometimes they're that blunt, but most of the time they just say they're less qualified. What they mean is they're less like the people that took law school and the bar exam in the 1970s and 80s and 90s up until the early 2000s. When I took the bar exam, most people in the room looked like me. Well, they were, me younger, but they looked like me back then. Today, that's not necessarily true. And so we have this really strange phenomenon in which the bar exam still tests and still uses the metric of what young white male, highly educated, highly affluent individuals would do and think and how they would perform on the exam. Well, the test has gotten more difficult. In the sense that it now can no longer be beaten by brute force and memorization. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But the result is that we have people coming to the test who simply aren't in that mold. They're more diverse. Now, I think that diversity brings a lot to the bar. It brings a lot to our community. We focus at Celebration Bar Review on those underserved populations. But the truth is that many people in that population really feel left out. The bar exam has just blown past them. Their law school has blown past them or ignores them or takes advantage of them. I have worked with thousands and thousands of bar students for more than 25 years. I cannot tell you that I think my students today are less qualified, less intelligent, or less hardworking than they were 10 years or 20 years ago. In fact, I think it's almost the opposite. Bar students today are more afraid of the exam. They work harder. They put in more hours. They start earlier. They do more than they did 10 years ago. So I don't think we can simply say, well, it's a less qualified applicant pool, therefore it's okay if most of them fail. That's ridiculous. The people that I've worked with who have passed the bar after multiple tries, in some cases 8, 9, 10 or more, have turned out to be great attorneys. Why? Because they have a sense of empathy, a skill, a perseverance, a tenacity that a lot of folks don't have otherwise. And frankly, we are missing out as a society if we keep those folks out of the bar after they've graduated law school, and in many cases been actually practicing law in other jurisdictions, but we keep them out because now they don't fit the mold of the young, eager beaver, 24-year-old 3L from Harvard or Stanford or Michigan. And I think that that's a real mistake. And so when you hear this statement that students are less qualified, I'd like you to switch it in your brain. I think what you really want to hear is students are more diverse. And because students are more diverse, not everyone fits into the same holes, not everyone fits into the same testing pattern, and the reality is that some people may have to do different things in order to be successful, but it doesn't mean that they're less qualified. And I really hate this. It just makes me crazy. You can probably tell that. When I see and read this being said. And by the way, the really snarky online bloggers and trolls who just are so proud of the fact that they passed the bar way back when, and they went to a really great law school and you didn't. I'm just up to my eyeballs with those folks. I mean, get out of your ivory tower, get off your punditry, and get out there and do something. If you're so damn smart, you change the world. But really, I think it's easier for them to sit on the sidelines and just talk about how wonderful it is that they went to big box law school and they're so brilliant and they passed. Okay, we get it. But get over it. it doesn't really assist anybody else, and it really irritates me. Well, you figured that out. Okay. The second thing that I think people are getting wrong about the bar exam results is this statement that I continue to hear and read and see all over the place that says the February bar exams are more difficult than the July bar exams. This is complete and utter nonsense. It is absolutely untrue. It is a myth. It is a fable. Well, let's just call it what it is. It's a lie. If you actually look at the bar exams themselves from every jurisdiction, and I'm talking about the UBE, which is almost over 30 jurisdictions, plus California, Florida, Georgia, Texas. So that's most of the big states. If I gave you the February test and the July test from any of those jurisdictions, and I asked you to look at those tests and tell me which one was harder and which one came from which exam, you could not do it. You absolutely could not do it. Why? Because there's no difference. There is none whatsoever. The National Conference of Bar Examiners does not have two versions of their tests. They don't have the hard version for February and the easy version for July. Nor does Florida or California or anybody else. This is an absolute lie. And it's one that's perpetrated over and over and over again that causes people to go, well, I shouldn't take the February bar exam because it's so much tougher. Well, what's going on? The reality is that all that's happening is that we're seeing lower pass rates because there's a different mix of applicants in the pool. You see, the test is exactly the same, but in February, in almost every jurisdiction, we have more repeat bar takers than first-time bar takers. And one of the things that we know empirically is that repeat bar takers begin to have a lower pass rate the more times they take the exam. Makes sense. If you failed once, you've got a lower chance than a first-time taker. Fail it twice, your chances go down again. Fail it 3 times, they go down again and again and again. Now, we've made a career at Celebration Bar Review of working with the people who are multiple time fails and getting them through the exam, helping them pass. We blow up those statistics, but we work with a very small number of people. And in the overall rates, we simply don't see people doing better. One reason is that people do the same thing over and over and over again, and then they hope for a different result. That's the classic definition of insanity, but there's a lot of insanity around the bar exam. And one of the pieces of this is that when you have repeat bar takers, they just keep repeating what they're doing, and their results continue to be unsatisfactory. And then they say, well, I'm going to sit out the February exam because it's so much tougher. No, it's not. It has nothing to do with it. Now, some people try to be a little more sophisticated than this, and they say, well, you know, the examiners grade the February test harder. No, they don't. The standardized test, the MBE, is graded by a machine. It doesn't know the difference one way or the other. And as I'll talk about in a moment, the mean score in the MBE is hardly moved for many years now. The essays and performance tests, they're graded with the same kind of point sheets and criteria from one test to the other. I have seen no evidence in 27 years that the examiners have ever told their graders grade differently for one test than another. If somebody's got that proof, let's see it. But I don't think you'll find it. And so when you hear this idea that the February exams are more difficult, it's just not true. Don't believe that, and don't let that impact what you choose to do. All right, the third thing that I think people are getting wrong about bar results, remember I said number one is this statement that students are less qualified. That's not true. They're more diverse. And secondly, the bar exams in February are more difficult. That's not true. It's just a different applicant pool. The third thing that people get wrong about bar results is that traditional, what I call big box bar review and big box law school methods work on the bar exam. Well, this one just totally makes me crazy. Here's what really is going on here. The traditional big box law school, the elite top 25 law school, can expect 60, 70, 80% of their graduates to pass first time out, maybe even higher, but at least that in every jurisdiction. Now, they have an elite group of students who meet the criteria that I talked about in statement number one. And for those students coming right out of law school in the study mode, a 7-week cram course is perfectly sufficient. It was sufficient in the 1970s. It was sufficient in the 80s. Look, in those days, all we did was drop information on students and they passed. Virtually everybody passed. That was the model back then, but the test is no longer the same. You see, in 2008, when the law and legal market started to crash again, as it does cyclically, The Bar Association said, whoa, you've got too many people at the top of the escalator here. There's no room for all these new attorneys. We've got to cut back, and we've got to lower the number of new attorneys in our jurisdiction. And you saw this in popular states like California, Florida, Texas, New York. There was an absolute move to reduce the number of new attorneys. Well, what happened was the examiners started changing the exam. They moved it from a memorize, recite, and simply deliver information kind of test to one that put a greater premium on analytical ability, the ability to take a fact pattern and a problem and then apply the law to it to reach a result. That shift has been profound, but it has been virtually ignored by both the big box law schools and their close friends, the big box bar reviews. You see, for the big box bar reviews, and we call them that because you got a big box and nothing else, those companies continue to provide information and nothing else. I mean, I'm really stunned when I saw an ad the other day on my Facebook news feed for one of the big box bar reviews, and they were touting their basic course with no assistance at all for $3,000. That's 3 times the cost of our course for no assistance whatsoever. Or you could pay $3,600 by financing it through them. That's crazy. That's crazy to do that. Why? Why do they do it, and why do they get away with it? Well, because it doesn't matter to them what the pass rate is. They own the pass rate no matter what happens. So they just keep pouring out the same stuff, even though it doesn't work and it's not true. And I'll show you that statistically in just a moment. But the point is that what people get wrong about results is that they think if you just keep using those big box methods, it's going to work. It's no longer true that the bar exam is the same as a law school exam. It measures a different set of skills. It measures the skills of practicing law, not the skills of learning law. It's not the penultimate law school exam. There's nothing that would suggest that at all. And so when people buy into that particular untruth, they're really preparing for the wrong test. And as the test changed from 2008, I call it moving the piñata. In other words, the target that you were aiming for literally got moved and you couldn't hit it no matter how hard you swung. We saw pass rates go down across the board, and the big box bar reviews didn't change anything. They're still teaching the way they did when I started in the bar review industry way back when. It is the same course, reading the same lectures, doing the same things the same way. They're still telling students to issue spot, to use IRAC-style writing, and that's utter nonsense. It's not rewarded on the bar exam, and yet they keep doing it. And so if you think that the way to pass the bar in this environment is to do what's been done for the last 30, 40 years in bar review, well, you're going to see very quickly and very painfully that the odds are stacked against you. Now, let me caveat this. If you go to a top 10 law school and you graduate in the top half of that class, you're going to pass the bar. And I don't think it matters what course you take, whether it's our course or somebody else's. You're going to pass. We know that. But the truth is that there are a lot of people that didn't go to those schools and don't live in the top half of their law school classes. And for those people, it's going to take something other than the ability to take your innate sense of how to argue and make arguments and use the law, and you're going to have to learn a different style, something different than what you did in law school. You see, one of the things that really makes me crazy is that three big box bar reviews and their cohort schools have most of the people own the course preparation for most of the bar takers in America. Okay, we'll grant them that. Well, if they own the bar prep for most of the bar takers in America, and most of the bar takers in America are failing the bar exam, what is the logical conclusion, LSATers? Yeah, it's that they have most of their students fail. And if that's true, why in the world do you think that that's the best way to prepare? It just doesn't make any sense, does it? So, there you go. Number 3, traditional big box methods work. No, they don't. And they haven't for a long time. All right. The fourth thing that people are getting wrong about bar exam results is that mindset doesn't matter, or if it does matter, it can be changed with just a few emails. Now, I need to explain this because this is really a crazy thing. Many years ago, I did a video called the number one tip for passing the bar, the most important thing to pass the bar. And I'll give away the secret right here. The most important thing was mindset. And I said that, and it's gotten thousands and thousands of views. It's a very popular video. We'll link to it for those of you that want to see it. In any event, we've been talking about mindset at Celebration Bar Review for years, but we don't just talk about it. We actually have invested in programs like photo reading and paraliminal recordings and audio meditation. We've talked about the relationship between exercise and study. We've talked about how you get yourself in the right frame of mind for not only to study, but to take the exam. We have focused on what it takes to come to the test with the best version of yourself. And that work is difficult, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of video. It takes a lot of conference time. It takes a lot of emails. It takes a lot of phone calls. It takes a lot of webinars and Q&As. It doesn't happen easily. Well, the California Bar, I think in a really kind of I don't even know how to characterize this. They just announced with their February bar results that they have something now called the Productive Mindset Intervention Program. It's a partnership with researchers at Stanford, USC, well, fight on, I am a Trojan, so I like that part, and Indiana University. And the purpose of the program is designed, and I'm quoting from the bar examiners here, it's designed to improve exam performance across the board with a particular boost for people of color and women. Go back to statement number one, that the bar takers are less qualified, they're more diverse. Well, finally, California's acknowledged that their bar takers are more diverse, so kudos to them for that. But what they're going to do, and this is the crazy part, the researchers are going to send out some carefully crafted emails right before the bar exam to help the people who've signed up for this program to have a better mindset. I wish it were that easy. I wish it were so simple that if you could just craft a few emails, simple emails from people that didn't know you at all, that just gave you the magic pill, the magic bean, and you suddenly would go to the exam and be there. I got to tell you, it doesn't work like that. I've been doing this for years. I have worked with some of the leaders in the personal development field, people like Bill Harris from Centerpoint Research and Paul Sheely from Learning Strategies. I've worked with leaders in education like Howard Gardner at Harvard. And I can tell you absolutely that you do not change people's mindset with a video or an email. Doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And so we've learned over the years that mindset change comes as a part of repetition, a part of influence, a part of consistency that just simply can't happen with 2 or 3 emails in the week before the bar exam. And yet the California examiners are making a big deal that they're going to test this because that somehow will change the results when people get emails from a university researcher that they don't know telling them to buck up and hang in there and change their mindset. Hey, look, if you want mindset improvement, just go to my YouTube channel. We'll link to it. I got hundreds of videos up there that are all about mindset. If that's all it took, man, that would be it. I'd get out of the bar review business and just be a motivational speaker. But that's not what it takes. It takes an integrated approach. You actually have to use mindset with the way you study, the way you write, the way you practice, the way you go to the exam. We invest a tremendous amount of time and energy at Celebration Bar Review on mindset because we know it makes a difference. We don't have to study it or research it to know this. But more importantly, we know that it comes when you trust your mentor, when you trust the people that you're working with, when you believe in what they're telling and asking you to do, when they're guiding you through the process. And so when people think that they're going to change mindset by sending some emails or having a program or a test program, well, it's really kind of window dressing, isn't it? It's just kind of giving a passing glance to those poor little people that don't understand what it takes to really be good, smart lawyers. It's very patronizing in my view. It's very paternalistic. And frankly, I think it's kind of insulting from the California bar examiners. So there you go. Preach it, Brother Jackson. So that's the fourth thing that I think people are getting wrong about results, that you can change mindset so easily and go. They're right about the fact that mindset makes a difference. It makes a huge difference on the exam, but it doesn't get moved easily. Well, the fifth item, I've saved the biggie for the last, really. The fifth thing that people are getting wrong about bar results is the notion that the cut score, the passing score in each jurisdiction, doesn't represent a quota and that it's fair and impartial. Here's some numbers to think about. I want to give you the relative cut score or passing score in 5 major jurisdictions across the country. The first, and I've equated all of them to the same scale, and I'll explain that in a minute. If we take New York, which is the uniform bar exam, As you may know, the Uniform Bar Exam is the same test in every jurisdiction in which it's given, but the passing score is different in different jurisdictions. It starts with the lowest passing score at 260, and it goes up from there. New York, the biggest of the UBE jurisdictions, has a passing score of 266. They weight the exam half between multi-state and half on the written portion, so we could say 133 scaled out of 200 points together would give you the combined 266. So keep that 266 number in mind. In Florida, using that same kind of scale of 136 on both sides of the exam, which is what Florida requires, we have a 272. So I'm equating these two different scoring systems. New York 266, Florida 272. In Georgia, the passing score is 270, so 135 on each end of the exam. I had to do some mathematical equations, but in Texas, the same number would be true, 270. If you take their 675 out of a 1,000-point passing number, and you divide by 5, so taking 1,000 down to 200 points, 675 comes to 270. So that's, in reality, the number that you need in Texas. All right, so we've got 266 in New York, 272 in Florida, 270 in Georgia and Texas, and along comes California. Now, California does a lot of things with their numbers, and it confuses particularly California bar takers. You hear about the 1440. Take off the last zero, it doesn't mean anything. 144 is really the number you need on the multi-state, that's 50% of your score, and 144 is the number you need on your written portion. Put those two numbers together, you need a 288. Now let that just sink in for a minute. That is 18 points higher in 18 points higher in California than you need in Georgia or Texas. It is 16 points higher than you need in Florida. It is 22 points higher than you need in New York. Now, I've lived in New York and I've lived in California, and I've worked with attorneys in both, and I've trained attorneys in both, and I've worked with attorneys in both. And I have to tell you that you don't have to be 22 points smarter to practice law in California than you do in New York, or that you should be 22 points smarter. This 288 number is an absolute outlier. It's a complete ridiculous piece of craziness. So why does it exist? Well, it exists because there's a quota. There's only so many students that are going, or new applicants that are going to be admitted to the bar. And I don't want to suggest here that bar examiners get together on a little cabal, that they go up to the top of the tower and they say, we're only going to let this many in. But in point of fact, that's what happens. They have a fixed number that they're letting in. Let's look at some other numbers for just a minute. When we look at the overall pass rate in the February 2018 exam in those same states, in New York, the overall pass rate was 38%. In Florida, it was 25%. In Texas, it was 45%. In Georgia, it was 47%. But in California, 27%. Now, here's what that tells me. This is the overall rate. Forget about the repeater or the first-time rate, but the overall rate. What it means is that even in the most generous jurisdiction, which was Georgia for an overall, which is skewed a little bit because of the smaller numbers, we still have fewer than half of the applicants. In other words, no jurisdiction is taking more than half of their applicants into the bar. And in some jurisdictions like Florida and California, they're taking only a fourth, 25, 27%. So what we see is that there is an absolute fixed limit. I believe that in these jurisdictions, what we're seeing is that they simply are refusing to allow more than that number of people in the February exams. And we'll see a higher pass rate in July because we've got more first-time takers, but we will still see a weirdly equivalent grouping in these pass rates across these big jurisdictions. Now, in New York, a 38% pass rate suddenly starts to look pretty good, doesn't it? But 38%, are you kidding me? When I came out of law school, the pass rate in these states, all of these jurisdictions, was up in the 80s or 90 percentile. Why? Because they needed attorneys. And if we needed more attorneys tomorrow, I promise you that these numbers would jump way up. Is it because students would get smarter and suddenly hit these numbers? No, absolutely not. It means that the scores would either be reduced, the cut score, or the scoring would be eased up and the numbers would be raised up. And that's not happening. The mean score on the multi-state bar exam across the entire United States, everyone that took the exam, was a 134. Now, it's been pretty close to that number, bouncing up and down, a point up, a point down, for the last few years. So in effect, if that's 50% of the scores everywhere, we're talking about a 268 is the average score that it takes to pass the bar. Well, that would get you into New York. It would not get you into Georgia, Texas, Florida, or California. Isn't that interesting? And so the multi-state is certainly a limiter on what people are doing right now. It is a built-in limiter that's keeping people away. And in California, if you're getting a 134 or a 1341, to put it in Cal terms, against a 1440, well, you're dead in the water before you ever get out. You're not going to get a high enough score on the written part to offset that drop that you needed. You're literally down by 10 points on the multi-state, so you need a 20-point increase on the written score, which means you got to go from a 144 on the written score to a 164. That's nearly impossible to do, and that's why you see a pass rate of 27% in California. The numbers don't lie. The numbers are straightforward. I think it's very clear that when people tell you that the cut scores are just objective numbers that are out there, they're not telling you the truth. The cut scores are there to keep people from becoming members of the bar. And so you're going to have to do more work. You're going to have to be more creative. You're going to have to try different things in order to be successful. Now, one thing I would certainly say is if you have any choice about where to take the exam, you should not take the California bar exam. Just shouldn't do it. It's just very difficult to be successful. Where should you take the bar? Well, right now I'd say the UBE with a 260 in most states or many states, and a 266 in a variety of states like New York, New Jersey, and DC, and lots of other options, is certainly the favorable jurisdiction to sit for. For example, if you're a foreign trained attorney, sit for the New York UBE, not the California test. I think that much is very, very clear. If this is going to change, it will change only when the big law schools and the big bar reviews make a shift in the way that they're teaching and the bar examiners come back to earth. There is no justification for a 288 in California, none. And the examiners even notice that, and they say in their notice this time that we are not making changes to the passing score or the content of the exam. But we are reviewing the bar exam and whether it's appropriate to test the knowledge and skills needed by entry-level attorneys. Yeah, sure. What you're doing is you're keeping out people. And so you can pass, you can get through it, but you got to put in a lot more resources. If you think the way you're going to pass the bar with those scores is to study for 7 weeks, to memorize, cram, recite, spot issues, do what you did in law school, I can tell you statistically you won't. The numbers are very clear in this regard. And if you're planning to take the big box bar review, well, you just heard the overall scores. 25% in Florida, 38% in New York, 45% in Texas, 27% in California, 47% in Georgia. Welcome to the big box bar review. Those are their pass rates. That's what they're getting. So the next time you hear that 3L rep tell you, you got to take on my bar review so I can get my free course because, boy, it's the best. Yeah, not really. So I think that the real point here is that you want to be a good consumer. You want to be thoughtful about this. You don't want to get caught up in the hysteria of all the things that are being said about the bar exam. There's so much misinformation out there. There's so many things that people are getting wrong about these results. I hope that you'll consider what you should be doing. Look, you should recognize that students are not less qualified. They're more diverse. You should recognize that the February and July exams are not any different from each other. They just have a different mix of takers. You should recognize that the traditional methods of studying and equating the bar exam to a law school test simply don't work anymore. You should also recognize that mindset is critically important, but it isn't going to be changed easily or with just a few random emails. And you should recognize that the cut scores are arbitrary. They are designed to create a quota system, and therefore you need to be strategic about where you sit for the exam. And if you're locked into a particular location, like California, because of where you went to school, you need to take extra steps in order to be prepared for the exam. There's just no other way around it. Now, I know that that's not particularly encouraging news for many of you, but here is the encouraging news. For years and years and years, we've worked with thousands of students who are more diverse, who are historically not the ones served by the traditional big box bar review. We've worked with the bar repeaters who have historical pass rates from their cohort of 5% or 10%, and they pass. And we share their stories with you as often as we can. On our website, there's a section called Case Studies, and we interview and talk to them. We have comments and testimonials from students. Why? Well, we want you to know that there's hope. We want you to know that it can be done. You can pass the bar. It is absolutely manageable. You can do it, but you have to take a different approach. If you keep doing the same thing and you want a different result, it's not going to happen. if you want something different, you've got to do something different. And that's going to be our message to you going forward. We want you to get a different result. We want you to pass, just like so many of our other students have. But we know that that only comes when you're willing to do something different. And the first thing you have to do differently is to stop believing all the craziness that's out there about what you should believe about bar exam results. Well, that's our message for today. He said, getting off his soapbox and coming off of the rant wheel and taking off the stem winder. I'm pretty pumped up about this stuff. I'm pretty jazzed about all the bad stuff that I think is happening out there, and I'm angry about it. I'm angry that it's misleading so many people, and I hope that you won't be one of those. I appreciate the fact that you watch or listen to this podcast. I hope that means you're better informed than most people that are taking the bar exam. I just want to remind you that we do have our free webinar coming up, How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. It'll be on Monday and Thursday evening live, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time. There's also an on-demand version of the same webinar. You do need to register in advance, but it's totally free, and I hope to see you there in one of the upcoming sessions. That's it for this episode of The Extra Mile. We'll be back next week for our 200th episode. I've got some great stuff planned for you. So see you next week, and until then, look forward to seeing you along the extra mile and on the pass list. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.